In the late stages of the Pacific War, Japanese soldiers suffered and died from starvation and disease before ever facing the enemy. How did the once proud Imperial Japanese Army descend into a state where even basic food could not be delivered? Of the approximately 2 million Japanese soldiers who died on the Pacific Front, around 80% perished from starvation or disease. This was an unprecedented and abnormal figure in world history. But, in truth, this tragedy harbored structural issues relevant even to modern organizations. What exactly was this ideology of logistics neglect that ultimately destroyed the Imperial Japanese Army? In this video, we will explain why the Imperial Japanese Army's early successes sowed the seeds of its downfall, who overlooked the importance of supply, and what lessons this holds for modern organizations. Now, let's delve into the full scope of the Imperial Japanese Army's logistics collapse. The main segment will further detail how the rivalry between the Army and Navy critically hampered supply efforts. Victory in the Russo-Japanese War elevated Japan to the ranks of the great powers. This experience of success instilled absolute confidence in the nation and solidified belief in the military's spiritual strength. Boasting one of the world's leading naval forces, its elite soldiers were overflowing with loyalty. It was believed they would not hesitate to sacrifice their lives for their homeland. The grand vision of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere promised the liberation of Asia and Japan's leadership, capturing the hearts of many. A wave of expectation and fervor swept across Japan. The state-of-the-art battleships Yamato and Musashi symbolized Japan's industrial and technological prowess. No one doubted Japan's victory, believing the future was brilliant. Domestically, labor mobilization was promoted, and weapons production peaked. The nation rallied to support the war, their enthusiasm becoming the foundation of the military's strength. The Imperial Japanese Army of this era was even said to be unparalleled in its spiritual fortitude and unity. It was believed that difficulties could be overcome through sheer willpower. Battles across Asia began with overwhelming Japanese victories. Their lightning-fast advances astonished Western powers and shook their colonial rule. These initial spectacular successes bred overconfidence throughout the military, masking the fundamental vulnerabilities within its strategy. This was the prelude to the tragedy that would follow. The successful attack on Pearl Harbor dealt a devastating blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet, cementing the impression of Japan's overwhelming superiority. This deepened their confidence in a quick war. In the Battle of Malaya, state-of-the-art British battleships were sunk by aircraft. This was a groundbreaking victory that profoundly changed the nature of naval warfare. During the Southern Operation, they continued their lightning advances, including the fall of Singapore in just 70 days. This speed far exceeded the expectations of Western powers. In occupied territories, a policy of local procurement for food and supplies was adopted. This temporary success of relying on local resources would later lead to a massive miscalculation. In early operations, transport convoys were rarely exposed to enemy attacks, allowing for relatively smooth supply lines. Naval and air supremacy had been secured. Japanese soldiers were known for their high morale and training, possessing very strong individual combat capabilities. It was believed they could fight through even the most difficult circumstances. Up to this point, the Imperial Japanese Army's rapid advance seemed undeniable. Many military experts must have acknowledged Japan's superiority at this stage. However, these early successes sowed the seeds of a catastrophic failure yet to come. Overconfidence in a quick war and an ideology of spiritualism led them to misjudge reality. The turning point was the excessive expansion of the front lines. The strategy of occupying vast islands across the Pacific completely disregarded the limits of logistics. The devastating defeat at the Battle of Midway severely shook Japan's naval and air supremacy. Yet, the High Command refused to acknowledge this reality. The Imperial Japanese Army had an ancient proverb emphasizing the importance of logistics. An army marches on its stomach. Yet, this wisdom was forgotten on the battlefield. The spiritualism that believed willpower could overcome hunger and disease was prioritized over logistical planning. this irrational ideology began to corrode the military. The turf war between the Army and Navy also hampered supply efforts. Joint operation of transport ships did not progress, and materials were inefficiently delivered, often wasted. American submarine warfare was devastating. Japanese transport ships were sunk one after another, leading to a desperate situation for maritime supply. Specialized units responsible for logistics were undervalued, lacking both personnel and budget. The logistics department was treated as an afterthought to the operations department. But here, a trap no one noticed had opened. The overconfidence born from early successes was steadily leading them towards ruin. The high command interpreted and concealed reports of defeat and the dire conditions on the ground in a self-serving manner. Unfavorable information simply did not reach the top. Extreme spiritualism, epitomized by the 100 million shattered jewels ethos, hindered rational judgment. Grit and determination were prioritized over realistic material calculations. Once a plan was decided, it could not be changed, even if known to be reckless. This was the sunk cost fallacy, a resistance to abandoning past investments and decisions. The Army-Navy rivalry not only impeded information sharing but also made it difficult to formulate common strategic objectives. The organization was operating in disarray. The reality of soldiers collapsing from hunger and disease on the front lines was distorted as it was reported up the chain of command. They turned a deaf ear to unpleasant truths. This closed organizational structure refused to incorporate objective opinions from outside. The Imperial Japanese Army became trapped within its own common sense. The ideology of neglecting logistics permeated the entire organization. It also led to a disregard for the lives of individual soldiers, accelerating the tragedy. Thus, the confidence built on early victories transformed into an arrogance blind to reality, and the organization plunged headlong down the path of self-destruction. Guadalcanal became Starvation Island for Japanese soldiers. Supplies of food and ammunition ceased, and countless soldiers succumbed to hunger and malaria. The imphal operation is remembered as one of the most reckless campaigns in history. Supply routes through the monsoon jungles were completely severed. Soldiers, dreaming of returning home, perished in mud and hunger. Many chose to die on the spot rather than be captured alive. The New Guinea front was also hell. The vast jungle made logistics impossible, and isolated units self-destructed. The relentless American destruction of supply lines completely prevented the arrival of Japanese food and medical supplies. Airdrops of provisions were minimal. When logistics, which should sustain soldiers' lives, fails, an army loses its very ability to fight. This tragedy exposed that cruel reality. The Imperial Japanese Army's supply failure demonstrated, with blood, sweat, and tears, how logistics determines the outcome of war. This is a lesson relevant even today. Organizations that turn away from reality and rely on spiritualism are destined to collapse. Planning, information sharing, and above all, prioritizing human life are essential. Initial successes can sometimes lead to misjudgment. The Imperial Japanese Army, blinded by the overconfidence born from short-term victories, overlooked the pitfalls of long-term strategy. The neglect of logistics was a structural problem stemming from a high command that prioritized spiritualism and disregarded realistic logistics experts, compounded by the rivalry between the Army and Navy. From this failure, we learn that in any organization, realistic planning, interdepartmental cooperation, and above all, prioritizing human life are crucial lessons. This past tragedy compels us to ask, what if? If logistics had functioned effectively, countless lives could have been saved, and history itself might have been altered. By understanding this history of failure, we can make more informed decisions when facing complex contemporary issues.